Hello and welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for watching or listening to us today. iTunes, Google Play, or Facebook, or YouTube. Thank you for liking and subscribing to us as well, telling your friends, and thank you 93.9 The Ville in Louisville as well. A great show we have today, and it's not hyperbole. In my business, it can be competitive. Sometimes it can be a little contentious. The smoothest group of people I've ever worked with. We get along. We have a real friendship. It's not just for broadcast purposes only. It's been the horse racing people that I've worked with at NBC, and this now my 20th year. And two of the people are going to be on this show today. Eddie Olczyk, the great hockey player and analyst, has written a book about his life in hockey and, most important, about beating the odds in cancer. He is a colon cancer survivor. So Eddie Olczyk joins us. And then Charlsie Cantey. We actually go back to ESPN days doing a morning where we did a lot of shows. One of them was morning at the track at the Preakness, the Derby, and the Derby Preakness Belmont. And we just had a blast for about 4 or 5 years working together there. And then she came over and we worked together at NBC. So they're both wonderful people. I'm not one of those like, oh, and here's my best friend, and here's one of my other friends. But these are really genuine friends, and the kind of people I can call and say, hey, you want to be on this show? They say, sure. What do you, we'll save you once again, and they are. Eddie Olczyk and Charlsie Cantey are coming up. TV, I've been in it a long time. I've been with ESPN, and then now with NBC. Like I said, my first NBC show was in late summer of '99, and then I did the Breeders' Cup in 99, and thank God I'm still doing it. With me, as always, Mr. Thomas Kenny, our ace researcher, among other things. Ben Chafin's on lead guitar and bass today. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Kenny.
Thomas, horse racing TV. I know you'll just be glued to every moment I'm on at the Breeders' Cup coming up in about 3 weeks on NBC.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. But you have some information about the history of horse racing on TV.
Well, of course, horse racing itself predates TV by, thousands of years. Yeah. But, as far as what you would consider modern organized horse racing goes back to the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And the first televised horse race that I could find was the 1949 Kentucky Derby on NBC.
Wow.
I think it was called NBC Red at that time was the station.
Wow.
And, That's before color TV, isn't it?
That is. Did you see me? I looked a lot younger then, didn't I? Did you see me there at that 1949 Derby? You're kind.
No comment.
Ben's in there. I can feel his comment coming on there.
Well, you were the one in the hat, right?
I was the one in the hat. Of course. You remember me from then, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And now, I don't know how many hours are out there that are on TV. I think it'd be hard to calculate.
Oh, yeah. And in all the different formats?
Yeah, because you got TVG, obviously. You've got, used to have HRTV. You got TVG now. Fox has a deal now where they're showing a lot of racing up New York, we just saw. Of course, with NBC, the summer series leading up to the Breeders' Cup, as well as, the big ones, the Triple Crown, bookend the year, Triple Crown, and then close out with the Breeders' Cup on NBC. So, it's a lot of horse racing out there.
Mm-hmm. I think CBS also, at least in the past, has carried some horse racing. Funny
you should mention that. I grew up watching CBS when they were doing all these races, and they had Haywood Hellbrun and Frank Wright and Jack Whitaker. I had the pleasure of working with Jack Whitaker briefly on a couple of ESPN shows, 18 years or so ago. Jack passed away earlier this year. Terrific man, and about as remarkable of a wordsmith as I've ever seen. He could step back, collect his thought, and deliver so eloquently what we just saw. He could put it into a context that few people could do. And so, yeah, and Charlsie Cantey, a young Charlsie Cantey was riding horses, doing interviews. Aha. See, Donna, my good friend Donna Brothers, was not the first female to do an interview on horseback. And so, yeah, so I grew up watching them. So, that was it. That was it. That was what I was going to tell you. I know it brought a tear to your eye, didn't it?
I'm holding it back. Barely.
Thank you. Ponder won the Derby that year, by the way, in '49.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I interviewed the winner. You didn't see me. Steve Brooks was a jockey. I interviewed him. I was riding a mule. No. Okay, so Charlsie's going to talk. We'll talk about those days, because she's worked with some of the legends in the business and really, broke the ceiling for all the other females that have come along, because this didn't have a woman announcing many sports, much less horse racing. Mm-hmm. And then Eddie Olczyk, we'll talk hockey. I just learned, as I keep learning from you and Ben, that Ben Chaffins was a hockey phenom as a child. Did you know that? A junior hockey star. I did not know that, Ben.
Yeah, I had to retire, unfortunately.
But you played for a team in Northern Kentucky, and they went up east and did well, and you were like in a major tournament. That's huge.
Yeah, we did okay. Just a simple win right there.
It sounded so much better earlier when he told it, didn't it, Thomas?
He's being modest.
He's being modest. And what, your coach knew Gordie Howe or somebody? Is that?
Well, I don't know if he actually knew him, but he had this sock from Gordie Howe that was his inspirational moment. Every coach has their inspirational thing that they bring out, and his was the Gordie Howe sock.
Wow, Mr. Hockey. Did he tell you what a Gordie Howe hat trick is?
No, he tried not to encourage that.
Yes, but, we know the hat trick is 3 goals through school, but Gordie Howe, because he was such a not just a great scorer but a tough guy as well, would be a goal, an assist, and a fight.
Oh, okay.
If you got those 3 things in a hockey game, you had the Gordie Howe hat trick. Not to encourage violence in you young hockey players. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
I think
it's part of the sport to a degree.
Yeah,
part of the culture.
Yeah,
we've all gotten one of those at some point.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
It's a rite of passage.
too violent there, Thomas?
The horse racing show does not condone violence.
Thank you for that disclaimer. Okay, so coming up will be the nonviolent continuation of the horse racing show. Eddie Olczyk, the author Eddie Olczyk, is up next, beating the odds in hockey and in life, and then later on Charlsie Cantey, and we'll all reminisce, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, so please stay with us. You are listening and watching and hopefully loving the horse racing show. Welcome back into the horse racing show, listening coast to coast in 17 countries. We thank you all, especially all of you YouTube watchers and subscribers. And this is one of the guys. If you could hang out with a guy for a day, you'd want to hang out with Eddie Olczyk. And I mean, I love working with this guy and just hanging around. And I'm just going to tell you all the credentials, not that he needs to hear them, not that you probably don't already know, but let's see, 17 years old. He's on the 1984 hockey team, Olympic hockey team. He's 16 NHL seasons, Stanley Cup champ, U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer, Emmy Award winner, lead analyst on NBC for NHL, and the top analyst, I think, out there in horse racing, handicapper. What else, Eddie Olczyk? Oh, you're an author, beating the odds in hockey and life. And now here he is, the aforementioned Eddie Olczyk. Enzo, how are you?
Hey, Kenny, always great to be with you. The one thing you missed on there was, and my good friend.
And my good friend. I forgot. I'm going to redo the whole thing.
We're good. We're good. Thanks a lot, Kenny. Always great to be with you, pal. And I'm sure there are a few teachers of mine back in the day that probably are shaking in their boots, if they're still with us, wondering how in the hell is Eddie Olczyk an author? Like, first off, he can't put three words together, let alone a book of 278 pages. And just for the record, Kenny, of course, we all have friends, that become ex-friends very quickly when they don't say nice things. A lot of my former friends asked if there were any crayons with this book. So the answer is no, there are no crayons with this book that I have put out to the masses in the world.
You're not that guy that has never read a book but wrote one, are you?
Well, full disclosure, I probably maybe a baker's dozen in my life. So factually, I have read. I have read more than none. So yes, so I think I'm well ahead of it.
This is a book that's gotten great reviews. You're getting a lot of attention for it. You talk about your hockey career, and most important, above and beyond everything, is your battle with stage 3 colon cancer, and you've been clean for over a year. And, that's the biggest odd to beat out there.
Yeah, for sure, Kenny. I mean, it is a story kind of about my journey. Look, we all have a story, right? Like we all have a story, and life is not easy. I don't care how old you are, where you come from. Life is a battle. And for me, I had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get where I was able to get to in international hockey, like you mentioned, playing for the '84 Olympic hockey team, and then playing, 16 years in the National Hockey League. And my life in broadcasting, not only in hockey, but also in horse racing as well. And that's where our paths have been able to cross. And I know I'm better for having you in my life and being a teammate of yours on NBC on our great horse racing team, which I love dearly. And, and you're right. And a lot of it is with my battle with stage 3 colon cancer. And, I've had the opportunity to write a book or two before, Kenny, and I was just like, who, I was hesitant, right? And then, and when I got sick, and then when I was going through my chemotherapy in late 2017 and early 2018, I just started kind of reflecting on my life. And again, I didn't know what was going to be on the other side of the 6 months of chemo. I really didn't. And I'm like, maybe I can share my story. Maybe I can inspire somebody either to, in particular with the cancer battle or any illness or anything that they may be going through, is maybe I can inspire one person, maybe to handle it, to stay away from it, to be proactive and say, hey, you know what? Like if I'm not feeling good, I should raise my hand and go see a doctor. I'm not going to put off getting a colonoscopy for 6 or 7 years when I should have it done, and maybe just help somebody get through the day. And I think that's where I really believe, and no pun intended, is like, I really think that's where I made the decision, and that ended up being the final chapter of me deciding to do this book was, you know what, maybe I can help one person. Maybe I can just put a smile on somebody's face and help them along and say, hey, you know what, if that old broken down horse player and hockey player can do it, well, I sure in the hell can, right? And I just, it's a story, I think, for everybody. I think it's a book for all ages, Kenny. I think if you're a hockey fan or horse racing fan, sports fan, or somebody that has been touched by this horrible disease, I think it's for everybody. And look, I think 3 things I would almost guarantee and promise. One is you're going to laugh, because there are a lot of hockey stories and horse racing stories in there. I think you'll cry, because it's a very in-depth, emotional journey about my life and people that are most important to me. And 3 is, I'm hoping, is that maybe, you'll love a little bit more, because I think anybody that knows me and is in my so-called circle knows how important they are to me. And I've always let them know how I felt about them. And in particular, my wife and my kids and my immediate family. But, I've always had this thing, Kenny, where I've always let my wife know that, look, like, God forbid, and, if something would happen to me, I hope you know and want you to know how much you mean to me and how much I love you. And I would not want to leave this earth and not have you know what you have meant to me in my life. And, like I say, it would kill me not to be here. And she didn't know that, right? Like, so, and my wife would always say, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. But look, at the big picture, Kenny, and we know it all, every day, right? Like, in the big picture, we're all day to day, right? Like, you hear sports coaches talk about players and all levels, and sit there and, and some in the media ask them, how's player A? How's your catcher? How's your goalie? And, he's day to day. And well, I'm in the big picture, Kenny. Aren't we all day to day? So I just think that it has a little bit of, everything there. And my wife is, she was there every step of the way, Kenny. She really was. The story.
I've been around her, Diana, and she's just special.
She, when I was at my lowest during my chemo treatments, treatment 2, actually, because I was diagnosed in August of 2017. I started my treatments on September 11th of 2017, my first treatment. And then on my second treatment, I think it was like the 25th or 26th of September, the side effects, Kenny, were just, and I talk about it in the book, but the side effects they broke me down. I mean, it was the nosebleeds, the headaches, the neuropathy. I developed a blood clot in my leg, and look, and you just go to the bathroom, like you have no control of your body, and let alone your mind because of the medicine. But you just go to the bathroom, and I told my wife I quit. And Kenny, I've never quitted anything in my life, pal. I've never. I mean, I don't care if I'm down 7-1 in a hockey game. I don't care if I'm down $2,500 at the racetrack.
I know Eddie Olczyk doesn't. I know that.
I'm not quitting. I'm not quitting, Kenny. But like, this tested my will to live. It really did. And I told my wife I quit. And I was emotional. I'm just like, how am I going to get through 2 treatments, let alone get through 10 more? And I got to get to the middle of February. And Kenny, this is probably the most powerful thing that I say in this book is that, look, like, my wife grabbed me, and this is why the caretakers and caregivers, and you know this very well, the caretakers and caregivers go through a lot too. Like, they may not be going through it physically,
right,
but they're going through it mentally. And my wife grabbed me when I wanted to quit, and she just looked at me and just said, fight for me, fight for our kids, and fight for all the people that love you. And Kenny, I mean, I cried for, it seemed like, for hours. I mean, it was like a 30-minute embrace. And I just needed to hear that. Like, I needed it. I took a deep breath, Kenny, and I just said, okay, you know what? And then I put back on my hockey helmet, and my days of, being a player and people telling me I would never accomplish anything in my hockey career or my hockey life. And I said, okay, I'm just going to chip away, Kenny. And I think that that's kind of where I go in this story. And like I said, if I can just inspire one person and help them get through the day, let alone their battle, then it was well worth the 16 months of this venture in writing this book.
This says a lot, what you just heard from this man. This is why I love this guy. And we've had an instant friendship since I first interviewed him on the roof at Churchill Downs when he had a break from the playoffs at the NHL, and you came as a spectator. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do, Kenny. I don't get many weekends off during the NHL playoffs, and our boss Sam Flood was kind enough to set me up with a couple of tickets, and I got there, and that's when our paths had crossed. And I've been watching you on TV since I was a young boy, Kenny, so I know who you were.
I knew that was coming. Eddie Olczyk, the book is Battling the Odds in Hockey and in Life. It's a great book, and it's available now. Edzo, if somebody listening right now wants to say, I need to have the Eddie Olczyk book, they can go to Amazon, I know.
Yeah, they could pretty much go to any book outlet, anywhere and get it. Proud to say that it's the number one selling hockey book out there right now. I'm battling with the great Nick Lidstrom of the Detroit Red Wings, who retired recently and one of the greatest defensemen in our lifetime in the NHL. He's got a book out, so we've been going back and forth, and I'm proud to say anytime I can have Eddie Olczyk in the same sentence of Nick Lidstrom, life is good, but and also too, I know it's doing very well. I think it's top 4 or 5 as far as books with cancer stories in them. So I'm very proud of it, Kenny. You're in there. Our family at NBC Horse Racing is in there. There are a lot of horse racing stories with some nice scores that I've had over my lifetime. There's a couple of real stories and sad stories in there about horse ownership for me, and so it's a little bit of everything. But yeah, you can find the book anywhere, and hopefully people will enjoy it. And like I said, I think you'll laugh, I think you'll cry, and I'm hoping most importantly is that maybe you'll love a little bit more, and we could, I think we all can use a little that more in all of our lives, regardless of where we are.
And that's the way Eddie is, because sometimes I was doing a polo deal. Remember a couple of years ago, I was doing a U.S. Open polo. Yeah. I get this text, and I'm looking, and he goes, hey, there's Eddie Olczyk. Just sent me you're watching. Yeah, it meant a lot to me. I mean, that was just nice. You didn't have to say anything.
Kenny, look at, buddy. Look at. People don't need to hear this, but you know what? Too bad. It's your podcast, and I'm your guest, so they're going to have to listen.
Okay.
To this. Like, you are, besides being a great coworker and awesome at what you do, you are a friend. You are a true friend. I am blessed that our lives have crossed, and like I said, I am better for it. You are the ultimate teammate. You have you have great respect from a lot of people in the industry of broadcasting, not just the horse racing industry. But I'm just very lucky that I can call you a friend, and you've been a great supporter of mine, and obviously when I was going through my battle, and I'll never forget the support and the texts and the calls. And
you inspired us.
We're gonna be friends through and through, regardless of of what comes up. But I just want everybody to know what I think of you. And got a chance to meet your dad for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
He loved that.
A great thrill. So
he's pretty tough for a 90-year-old guy, ain't he?
Oh man, he looks amazing. He looks amazing. So look, where can I sign up for that deal? Let me know. Can you let me know, please?
I think you got to work in a coal mine for 40 years. That kind of toughens you up if you survive that. You're pretty tough.
Tough man, your father, no question about it.
Well, I'm blessed to have him, to have you, and to have some really friends in my life. And I spoke of it earlier, Eddie. Other sports I've covered, it's not the camaraderie as it is with our NBC group. Yeah. They're the people I genuinely like, the people I work with on the horse racing show.
Yeah, you know what? It's look, we all want to do well. I mean, look, everybody has egos, right? That's just human nature. That's how we are wired. But you know what? There's when we get on our shows, we have really, we have one goal, right? Yeah. And that's to put the best product on the television and tell people, tell the story, don't be the story. And I think from our leadership of Sam Flood and Rob Hyland all the way through to Billy Matthews and Lindsay Shanzer, the people, that are our bosses and calling the shots from producing and directing, and then our talent out in the field. I mean, I think we have an amazing team, and the chemistry is great. We have fun, and that to me is I love going to work, and I feel very lucky to be able to go to work and do what I do and love to do it, not only because it's a passion of mine and I want to be the best at what I can do on our shows, but it's the people you work with what makes it fun, right? Who wants to go to work and be miserable? That's just, hey, you know what? We're lucky. We got a great team, and that's how I look at it. And you're a huge part of that. And I can't wait to get together with you when we get to California for the Breeders' Cup. Kenny's right around the corner, buddy. We're less than 3 weeks away, man.
Considering this is called the Horse Racing Show, I should ask you, is there one or two races that you're really interested in the Breeders' Cup this year?
Yeah, you know what? I am really, really going to be interested to see what Richard Mandella does with Omaha Beach. He win the 3 quarters, a 6 furlong race in California, 7-10 days ago, whatever it was. And does he decide to leave him at 3 quarters and run him in a sprint, or does he stretch him out? Right, it's 3 options, right, Kenny?
Right.
He's 3 quarters, he goes to the sprint, he goes to the mile, or does he go old school and go from 3 quarters of a mile to the mile and a quarter? Like that to me is front and center. That is to me that's the question. Without any hesitation, is that where he goes will be absolutely huge. If he goes to the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's going to take money. Bob Baffert's McKinsey is going to take money.
Yeah.
You're going to have Code of Honor for Shug, who is just my Derby horse this year, is just absolutely blossoming into, I think, what a lot of us thought he would. And oh, by the way, you have Vinny Viola and Mike Rapoli's Vino Rosso sitting there, getting disqualified from his last race with bumping. He's sitting on, coming out to Santa Anita, where he's a proven winner out there. So, I got to go to the Classic. I really do. Because I just think if Omaha Beach goes, Kenny, you could argue and sit there and go, you could run this race 10 times and you might get 11 different winners, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean.
That's how close it is.
I think it's really as wide open as ever.
I would look at the Classic, Kenny. I would look at the Classic.
Yeah, I think it's as wide open as ever, the Classic.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I can't wait. And look, how about the juvenile? I mean, you got Romans' horse, right? Dennis Moment, right? Dennis's Moment. I think that's the name of the horse, right? Yeah. You got 8 rings for Baffert, right? And then you got the horse that win at Keeneland the other day. I think it was a Maximus, I believe. That right, they made that huge. It looked like a Rossi there making. It
wasn't a Rossi type move, wasn't it?
For Brendan Walsh, right? So you got, 3 absolute beasts there. I could see that race, Kenny, falling apart, because I mean, there is usually you get those 2-year-old races in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, going 2 turns. You got horses that are quick and they're proven speed, and then you get a couple of horses that are trying to stretch out, or and they go so quick so early that all of a sudden you get this one horse. But that's another race that you can sit there and probably make a case for 3 or 4, and all of a sudden some 40-to-1 shot comes and picks them up and lays them down, and hopefully we're on the right side of that pillow.
It's a Volpone year. Who? What was that horse's name again?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, Eddie, I love to catch up with you, and I can't wait to see you, and I'm so happy for the book and so happy that you've been cancer-free for over a year. That's the most important thing, my friend.
Kenny, you're the best. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Say hi to your dad for me, okay, pal?
I will. Say hi to the family. Love you, Eddie.
Talk to you soon. I will, man. See you, pal.
Thanks, pal. Eddie Olczyk, truly one of my favorite people on earth, beating the odds in hockey and in life. That is the book. You can get it on Amazon and pretty much any bookstore right now. We'll be back to talk with Charlsie Cantey when we return here on The Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and watching us on YouTube, listening to us on iTunes and Google Play, and 93.9 The Ville in Louisville, Kentucky. This is one of my favorite people I've ever worked with or just hung around with. She is the first lady of racing, and Caton Bredar and Donna Brothers and Britney Eurton and Jeannine Edwards and everyone that's followed has said the same to me. She is Charlsie Cantey. Charlsie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Kenny. You've got me all choked up with that opening. Bless those girls' hearts. They do a most amazing job, and it's so fun to watch them. They're just terrific.
Well, they all talk about you, and, you look back at horse racing, and there were no women covering horse racing that anyone remembers, and then you come along in what was a boys' world at that time, and you're working with, among some of the legends you're working with early, were like Frank Wright and Jack Whitaker, and, of course, you went on to Jim McKay and Al Michaels, Tom Hammond. Not many people work for CBS, ESPN, ABC, and NBC, and you've done that, which speaks great for your career.
It's what I call my alphabet soup, but you were so kind to say all that, and it's true. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and it all happened because I just loved riding horses, and I wound up getting a chance to go to work on the racetrack back in the late 60s, and believe me, you think there weren't many women in television? There weren't many women on the backstretch either, and that was a tough world, and yet it didn't really matter because all I wanted to do was to ride and put my heart and soul into it. I couldn't get up early enough to go to the barn and do what I had to do all morning and work, and just it led me to be in the right place when they decided they wanted to put a woman on the telecast, the local show there at Belmont, racing from Belmont, Saratoga, Aqueduct, whatever. And they were looking for someone who knew the sport. Well, there weren't many to choose from, and that's why I was so lucky. I just happened to be in the right place. And if you remember, it all started, everybody you've mentioned so far weren't even born when all this happened with me. So you're hearing it from the old dinosaur herself. But it happened back when I was working for Frank and David Whiteley, and Ruffian was becoming the superstar, the miracle that she was. And various people would come from the media, from the publicity department at Belmont there, and look for updates on what she was doing and when would she train, and I was in the barn with her and so on. And Frank Tours, rest his soul, he would come around the barn and he'd say, they're looking for a woman. You'd be perfect. You need to go over and talk to Bill Creasy, and you ought to go. He would do this with me every single day. And all I wanted to do was just do my job at the barn, and in the afternoons, a lot of times we were breaking yearlings out at the Phipps's estate. In those days, it existed out in Westbury, and there was a handful of yearlings that were there. So Mr. Phipps, Denny's father, Ogden Phipps, would come down and watch the horses train, the yearlings train, and we would gallop them around the old steeplechase field there, where his wife used to have all her jumpers. And that was my life. That was all I wanted to do, and all I wanted to do was make Frank Tours leave me alone. I said, okay, I'll go talk. I'll go. If you will just please leave me alone. So I go up there in my muddy boots, and I meet Bill Creasy, who, as we all referred to on the front side, was one of the suits. And he had originally put Phyllis George on the NFL Today, and he wanted to do the same thing, but he wanted someone of the sport this time around. And I just went in there, and he asked me why I was qualified for the job, and I said, well, I'm not. I'm just trying to get Frank Tourist to leave me alone. And so he laughed, and we talked a little bit, and then off I went. And then about a week later, I got a phone call. Frank Wright, he and Dave Johnson, my beloved Dave Johnson, who held my hand through all these awful traumas I had. He had to go away to do a race out in California, and Dave needed someone to be on the show with him. And poor guy was stuck with me. Well, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and he got me through it. And we've been lifelong friends ever since. And I loved Frank, loved Jack Whitaker. And I can't tell you how lucky I am and how grateful I am to have been in the right place. Because if it weren't for the horse, I have no idea what my life would have been, but look what it did for me.
And I got to work with you because of that. See,
And there was you, K. Bernie, man.
Look what it did. Look what it did for me. We used to get
How many dogs you got now, huh?
You know what? I have no more dogs. I've been traveling so much that I haven't had a chance to have a dog in a while. But I love my golden retrievers.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I like all dogs. I'm a little more biased to the Goldens, but I have no problem.
Cutest puppies that ever lived.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and you know how they are. They'll just look at you and
and they'll go home with the milkman. They're not much help in the Defense Department.
Well, they're not.
They're great dogs.
But I remember
Joe Cantey, he and I always had a batch of Goldens. I don't know if you and I ever talked about
No, you know what? You mentioned that one time because I showed you my two dogs, Bernie and Andy, my two Goldens over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, so there we are. But anyway, the racetrack is always a great place to have dogs. I had a mutt that Joe Cantey got for me one time, and he was half shepherd and half lab, and God knows what else he was. And he was the dog of my life, and he came from some litter out of somewhere on the racetrack. I don't know where he came from, but God, he was a good dog. He really was. So anyway.
And then I show up, and we do a show in the mornings. It was like was it breakfast at the Derby? On ESPN. Well, we did Racing Across America together on ESPN. I had the great pleasure working with Charlsie Cantey, Racing Across America. Then later on at NBC on the Breeders' Cups and the Derby, the Preakness. But anyway, those morning shows were fun.
They were really fun, but God knows we had to get up. Racetrackers always got up really early, but we don't always have to go out looking our best. We just put on a baseball cap and a helmet and off we go. But in those shows, you had to kind of be dressed and ready. And I'll never forget that one morning. It was such a dirty trick. And there I am all tired and bleary-eyed, and I don't have the right clothes, and it's raining, and it's a bad hair day. And who do they bring on as our guest? Do you remember, Kenny? Bo Derek. And I got to sit next to her. I mean, that wasn't even fair, but she was wonderful, and she's still so involved with racing out in California.
I was just happy to be there with both of you.
Person.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments.
Yeah, but blondes always have all the fun,
No, I don't know. We had a lot of fun.
We did.
We got to tell jokes on the air, which is probably why they kept me so long. But no.
Why the long face, Kenny?
Remember the deal was, it's not like the most unique story. It happened several times, but one of the stories that one of our reporters were doing and was on this horse that drank Guinness, had to drink beer to maintain weight. And Charlsie and I are, we're hosting it, and we're on the backside there with the Twin Spires behind us, and we come out of that. And I just said, a horse walks in a bar, and a bartender says, "Hey, buddy, why the long face?"
I'll never forget it. I never hear that joke, and I never see Guinness without thinking about you, I swear.
And you told me
the time.
And you told me about yours. Remember, you had a horse that you said had to drink so much beer. Yeah, yeah.
Well, she was a long, lanky filly, and she was hard to keep weight on. And some of the many Irishmen who around the racetrack said, "Oh, you got to get a pint into her every day." So I would go up. I was training. I had horses at Laurel, so I would go to this wonderful huge big wine outlet store, and they of course had beer. So I would go in like every week and bring back these couple of cases of beer. And the same guy kept seeing me. He had to ask for my ID every time I came and went. He said, "Lady, you sure drink a lot of beer." I said, "Oh, no, sir, you don't understand. It's for my horse." And they practically wouldn't sell it to me,
Oh.
But I'll tell you, it worked on that filly. She wound up one of my best horses that I was fortunate enough to train. She wound up weighted on the experimental 2-year-old list, and she was graded stakes placed, and it was all for the Guinness. She loved her dark ale.
See, and look at you. You could have you should have gotten an endorsement from them. You could have done commercials.
I should have. That'd be like Joe Canty after Temperance Hill won the Belmont. I'll never forget this. And all the crew came around. I've got a video of Tom Brokaw, who looked as young as Joe did in 1980, and they were doing interviews and everything. And so Brokaw asked me, he said, well, did you go out and drink champagne last night? And if anybody remembers Joe, he's very laconic. He said, nope. He said, I had my Tia Maria. Well, Tia Maria arrived, stacked cases of it at the house. They gave him a year's supply of Tia Maria. So there you go.
See? That product placement. That's the key.
Exactly.
That's what I'm learning about. They're telling me all this marketing stuff, on this YouTube. And I say, look, I'll show up. I'll get a great guest like Charlsie Cantey, and we'll just go. And that's what we just do. That's what I've always
Wait a minute.
done.
We haven't plugged Marlboro yet. They did the Marlboro Cup. I wasn't allowed to say Marlboro on the air. We called it the Cup. Well, of course, I slipped up and said Marlboro, and the next thing I knew, I get all this stuff from Marlboro, and I didn't even smoke. So there you are.
Well, you did 17 straight Triple Crowns, and of course the Breeders' Cup's involved there. I mentioned all the different networks. People ask me, and I certainly, everybody knows you in the business. Like 3 people know me. You're one of them, so you come on the show. But
oh, stop it.
It's hard to say like a moment. For me, like American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown and being the first guy to interview Bob Baffert right afterwards. That's huge. You don't forget that.
Yeah. Oh,
but
there's nothing like it.
But there's also moments. To me, the toughest interviews are when it goes not great or it could be bad. And you had one of the best interviews I think ever in sports, particularly in horse racing. Was in 99 at the Belmont, and Charismatic's going for the Triple Crown, and Chris Antley had to pull him up in the final jumps just before Lemon Drop Kid wins it, and Antley's out there caressing his, it was just a beautiful scene for what could have been a tragedy. He's caressing the leg and holding on to the hoof of Charismatic, and then you do the interview with him shortly thereafter as to what happened, and I just thought it was a golden moment, and I still do.
Well, thank you, Kenny. That's one I won't ever forget. And bless his heart, Chris Antley, God love him.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget him. He was actually holding up Charismatic's, trying to keep the weight off it, and probably did a great deal to saving his life. And Charismatic went on to his stud career. But Chris's future after that was not so salvageable, and we know what happened. And I'll never forget him looking at me, and he looked up, and he was so troubled. And those eyes of his, he had the most beautiful eyes, and he looked at me, and he said, I'll never forget it as long as I live. And I just that was one of the saddest things in racing. It really was.
And you handled it beautifully, though, and it was very touching for everybody watching it. And and then of course,
I thank you for that. It is so sad to think that Chris's life did not go on as it should have, and did not end so well. But he was such a good rider. He was right down here in South Carolina, not far from where I am now.
Yeah.
And every time we go up the highway, and I see Ellery and St. Matthews, and that was his home ground, and I think about him all the time. And he has a daughter out there somewhere, Violet, and his wife, and I've lost touch with them. Should they hear this, I would love to hear from them again, because we kept in touch for a good while, and then they moved, and I lost the address. But anyway, on to brighter things.
See, this would be. I hope they
pods.
listen and get in touch, because then this will be something even new for the show. By the way, we're heard in California. We have a lot of listeners. Interestingly enough, California, New York, and Kentucky, I think, are kind of in that order of our our states with the most listeners. By the way, Kentucky's not number one.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
See, it's like we're nationwide. Wow.
Yeah.
Much like you, much like Charlsie Cantey, work for everybody nationwide. You're popping.
Whatever happened to? Yeah.
Do you have a horse out there or two that just a special memory? And it may not always be the obvious. Sometimes I've had people on the show say, "Well, it's Secretariat." And then sometimes it's been, it was a horse that my dad and I saw together, and it just meant something. Like I took my dad. The only time he ever went to the racetrack, we saw Swale win out at Keeneland. He always liked Swale, and so that's still a special horse to me for that reason. And, I don't know, do you have a horse or two that really just touches you?
quite so many, or maybe a horse that I trained or a horse that Joe had in the barn, but the horse that towers over everything, who's always my beloved war-scarred veteran, is Forego. He's always been the horse of my dream. He could do anything. Do you understand? He'd win sprinting or he'd win the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He just was amazing and the ultimate weight carrier. And if anybody, here we go, Marlboro, I'm going to give you another plug. Remember the Marlboro Cup when he carried 137 pounds? Shoemaker rode him then. Yeah. And Peb did that wonderful cartoon, the wonderful drawing of the crane lifting the tack, all Forego, and Frank helping guide the crane that had Shoe's weight pad on it. And he carried 137 pounds. He was given away, and I think Honest Pleasure, I believe, was the horse that he was running down in the stretch. Carried like 109. And nowadays, anyone gets 122 pounds and they weep and cry, and handicaps are pretty much gone, which makes me sad.
Yeah.
But that was one of the greatest all-time races I ever saw. I mean, he did the impossible. And then go back a little further. I hope there's still people out there that can even remember this. Ta Wee, remember the little sister to Dr. Fager?
Yeah.
And she would carry 140. I forget now. I have to go back and look up. In the 40s, she would carry 140-some pounds in the fall high weight. And John Rotz would ride her, and she was just incredible. Horses like that, they were the old warriors, and we don't really see that much anymore. You got to look fast to see the good ones now. They run 6 or 7 times, and they're gone.
Well, that's it. And it's all about speed now. I mean, they're breeding for speed. Yeah. You go the 2-year-old sales, it's all about how fast. Endurance seems to be a secondary thing.
I hear you. I mean, the year I pinhooked some yearlings, if you could get one down there at 11 flat, they were going to be sold. Now they're going to 9 flat.
Yeah.
I mean, the game is. I remember Frank Whiteley when he was retired and living in Camden. I would talk to him, and I'd see him all the time, and I'd say, "Oh, Frank, don't you miss it? Don't you want to go back to the track?" And he'd just shake his head and chew on his toothpick, and he'd say, "Nah," he said, "Game's passed me by. I don't even understand it anymore." And that's kind of what I feel now.
You told me something a long time ago about people, we're talking the general public, and we get some, notes from people that are casual horse fans that listen to this show, which we appreciate. Most people follow the sport on a regular basis that listen, but I always like to hear from the casual observer because, as you pointed out to me a long time ago, Charlsie, most of us, like I played, I played to a limited extent. Basketball, played flag football, baseball, stuff like that. You know how it is. We do this stuff. And then, you can drive a car fast. That doesn't mean you're going to be at Daytona, but you can rev it up to 95 on the interstate every now and then or something. In other words, you have an idea. You can fantasize in your mind what it would be like to be. But to ride a race, I've been on trail rides. I've never ridden a horse that probably went past 10 miles an hour. I have no clue, but I have great appreciation. And you're the one that pointed that out. It's really hard to identify what it's like to be in a horse race and get a horse ready.
Well, you're leading me back to the wonderful quote from my dear, dear Frank Wright. And he said it and said it loud and often on the air. There is no little league for horse racing. And that is why it is so hard to gather fans, because they don't know what they're looking at. They don't understand. There was always that big discussion about whether jockeys were athletes or not.
Right.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I know.
So remember, this was back at CBS before you and I worked together when I first was working, and Bob Fishman did all the CBS shows, and he got John. Help me here, football, Big John.
John Madden. Yes,
Madden.
John Madden.
All I could think
yeah.
of was Mattis.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking of Mattis, and I knew that wasn't right. So I'm not Mad Dog, but John Madden, and he came, and Bob got him to follow Angel Cordero around for the week before the show. And John Madden stood on the air and said, "I apologize to all my football players." He said, "But jockeys are ounce for ounce the greatest athletes that ever lived."
Yeah.
And there you are. But you can't fantasize. You cannot put yourself on the back of a horse going 40 miles an hour, bursting out of the gate. And it's not really about that. Oh, the jockey will have control. You're kind of going for a ride on a rocket. You can kind of help and guide it and steer it a little bit, but it is just a feeling and a fantasy that you can't explain and nobody can understand. So, Frank, I keep thinking about it so often. There is no Little League. Kids can't go in practices. That's why racing is so much bigger in England and Ireland, because kids grow up on pony. I mean, they know about riding, and they ride pony races, and they have a Little League. We don't.
That's a great point. I love that story. And
that's all due to Frank Wright.
Charlsie Cantey, a legend in broadcasting, CBS, ESPN, ABC, NBC. Oh, you are. Let's not downplay.
So
Everybody knows.
I got 10 seconds here. I got to say one thing to all the gals that do such a great job today. To this day, and I did get to start the horseback interview thing, and that's another long story with CBS and Bob Fishman. But I did start the horseback thing, but I didn't do it for very long, as you remember, and I had the catastrophe at the Preakness in 1986 when the whole thing fell apart, and I told Kurt Gowdy Jr., I said, I'm never getting another horse on the air again. So 1986 was the last time I did a horseback interview, right? Mm-hmm. So to this day, I still have people say, I saw you on the Derby last weekend, and I'm thinking, oh, God, they all think I'm as cute and young as Donna Brothers and Caton Bredar and everybody else. I said, oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad you were watching. And I just take it and take it home. So there.
You know what? That's because you've left an indelible mark on people. See, I remember you on the NFL studio show.
Oh,
on
my
CBS.
God, you were young. You were young. No. That was an experience. That was a whole experience.
But that was fun to watch. I think you enjoyed that, didn't you? I mean, it was,
I did, yeah. And to this day, my son still says, Mom, tell me again about when you went to this camp and that camp.
Yeah.
Fly out and go to everybody's training camps. And he just thought that was the best. And then there was Westminster. That was one of my most favorite things I did. Ben Harvey got me on that show.
Remember, I used to text you every year when you were doing it. I don't know if you even remembered. But I would love it. I would watch it. I go, I know Charlsie Cantey. I did. Remember, I'd send it to you.
And I know you.
And I would say,
and I love it. You're on everything. Every time I turn on the TV, there you are.
Well, you always send me nice notes, over the years, an email or something. And, it's just great to hear from friends. But I love that Westminster show. That's the one thing I'd like to go to. I mean, I'm not going to work it, but I always thought maybe I'd like to go one year. I always get upset.
It's a great experience. Yeah, it was fun.
And like a Beagle won it recently, right? A Beagle, I think, won it recently.
But I hate to tell you this: the Golden Retrievers are never going to win. Neither are the Labradors, because their motion is in the water, not on the red carpet. So that's where they lose. But they're always there. They're wonderful. It's a great experience. Everybody should go see Westminster. It's a blast.
And now you're enjoying retirement. We're not going to ever get you back on TV with us.
Nope. No.
Darn it.
It was a wonderful 30 years. And actually, I have to say it was 20 years with the Triple Crown. And the only reason I remember it so distinctly is because Donna and Tom Hammond and the whole ABC gang gave me a cake with Happy 20th on it. And I have a picture, and that's the only reason I can remember, because it was all a blur.
Oh, that's right.
It all started back in 75, and it ended in 2005.
I was there. I should have remembered that. I was there.
Blur. Yeah, you were there. You're in the picture. Yeah.
I was there. I should have remembered.
One of our production meetings. Can we tell the story about the
please.
moonshine? Or,
please, go ahead.
What stays in the meeting, right?
Then we would have these. David Michaels was a producer. We would have these long meetings. Yep. They would have a buffet. They'd have an open bar, and they would have these meetings.
But who brought the moonshine? Was it Bob Costa?
Actually,
somebody brought a little thing of moonshine.
Me, the non-drinker of the bunch, as you know, I'm the non-drinker, but I brought the moonshine. I had a friend that had a friend who got the moonshine.
You brought it?
Yeah, Tom Hammond.
My God. Thank you, Kenny.
Tom Hammond.
The only way I could stand those meetings, they were so long. Oh, God.
They were longer than the shows at that time, weren't they? We'd have remember Tom Durkin? Tom Durkin would start a stopwatch, and we would all take kind of side bets and all on over/under on how long the meeting would go, wouldn't we?
That's right. You got it.
And usually he'd set it like around 3:48, 3 hours 48, and it wasn't too far off. But anyway, Tom thought to welcome people to Kentucky that I would get could I get moonshine? And I knew some people who knew some people, and I brought some. And they passed it all the way around the room.
And everybody only had one sip because it's not very drinkable.
And nobody lit them.
Especially Tom Hammond and Dave Michaels and the sommeliers of the world. Those two, they drank nothing but the finest wines ever. I mean, some of these stories need not be on the air. We won't tell these stories.
And I just know nobody lit a cigarette or struck a match during that time. That whole meeting.
No, it was the grape. It was all about the grape.
And that's a fun part. I said earlier, and it's very true. It's a competitive business what we're in, and but you covering other sports as well, and I've covered a lot of different sports. There's been some. Never like conflicts, but a little contentious at times with some other announcers. But in horse racing, of the teams I've worked on at ESPN and at NBC, I'm in my 20th year with NBC, by the way, coming up with this Breeders' Cup.
Wow,
my
really?
first one was 99. Jeez, who knew? But anyway, it's a good group. I mean, I've really never had an issue. Some people I just think more of like you, but I've never had an issue with anybody in the horse racing side of TV coverage. Talking about the announcers.
Well, exactly. But remember, during our span at ABC, which was a pretty long run, we wound up getting split into geographic groups. We had the Kentucky Mafia, of which you were a member, right? Remember those?
Yeah, it was Tom and Mike
Kentucky
Battaglia
Mafia.
and Donna Brothers and me.
And Donna and Tom.
This was the NBC thing, and that was you and.
Well, wait a minute. We got to get the Eastern people in here.
Oh, yeah.
We had me and Numi, and we were the Eastern establishment. So I had baseball caps made for all of us.
I've still got mine.
And, you sent the picture, didn't you? You sent a picture not long ago.
Yeah.
We would identify ourselves as we troll the backstretch in the mornings, getting our information and wearing our hats. I still have my Eastern establishment. I hope Numi has his.
I do too.
Anyway,
I think everybody. I think Tom and Donna and Mike. I think everybody still has theirs because that was just great memories and just fun times and and again it's such a delight to catch up with you. And will you come back
too.
and be on this show again sometime?
I absolutely will. What you need to do is get me and Dave Johnson on together because we sort of see each other every so often up in New York, and we start reminiscing, and it's hard to stop us. So,
well, I'd love
get
to
us together. That would be
I'd
fun.
love to. I worked with Dave at ESPN. I worked with Dave years ago doing harness racing.
Yes,
I did that
I
harness race series. Yeah.
I was forced one year during ABC. I was forced to go and do the Hambletonian, and I said, "No, Kurt Gowdy." He said, "You're going to do this." I said, "No, I'm not. You've got a contract. You have to go." So I don't know anything about harness races. Oh my God! It was the worst experience. I had no idea what I was talking about. But the best part was I got to ride in the car with the starting gate, and I was like, the horses were like 2 feet away from me, and they're pounding at you fast and furious, and the car roars away and the gates fold up. That was worth all the agony of that whole show, was that experience. I mean, I've gotten to do some really cool things. That was one of them.
And the next time we'll talk more about it because you got to come back on. This has been too good.
All right. Hey, Bernie, man, I love talking to you. Loved everybody out there, and let's just hope for a good and safe and exciting Breeders' Cup, okay?
Yeah, I love you, Charlsie. Your husband, Doug, knows that. We all love Charlsie Cantey. One of the great people in broadcasting. There.
Thank you so much.
There, I said it.
Bye.
I'll see you soon. Thank you, dear.
Love it. Bye.
All right. More of the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode 39, by the way, if we had not mentioned that earlier.
We're keeping it up.
It just flies by, and thanks to you for all your support. The Facebook growing and growing, the people that are liking us on Facebook. We hope you also like and subscribe to us on YouTube. We emphasize that a lot because then that puts you up in a different tier of YouTube. Is that correct?
We get extra features to, make little edits and basically improve the show.
Okay, so hopefully it doesn't cost anything. So just like it and then subscribe to it. And then you don't even have to watch us again. We hope you do. Just saying. My goodness, today we talked about moonshine. It's kind of like they used to have me do, when I would do some of the, they would send me out to do like a mint julep story or something. They all would laugh because I was like the only non-drinker. Eddie doesn't drink. Jerry Bailey doesn't drink. I don't drink. But, at that time, I was like the only one on the staff that didn't, 15 years ago. We talked about fighting and hockey. Mm-hmm. Boy, this has just been one for the children today, hasn't it? We mentioned Marlboros. Charlsie was talking about when they had the Marlboro Cup, which was a huge horse race back in the day. Okay.
And don't forget horses and beer.
And horses and beer. Thank you. We ought to get Toby Keith on this show. I would love to get Toby Keith on because he is a horse owner. And he was at the Breeders' Cup last year, so he really is into it. So hopefully one day, that'd be like on my wish list of other guests. Toby Keith could come on. Now, there's a real cowboy guy, you know. I mean, I bet he'd be a cool guy to hang out with, much like Eddie Olczyk is and Charlsie Cantey. She's just a delight. I just am really happy to catch up with my friends. Okay, so young people, don't drink when you're underage. Don't drink in excess. Don't get in fights. Don't do drugs. Did we do the disclaimers now to make this a clean, healthy, happy show?
I think you covered all your bases.
Okay, and now the last thing we're doing. We have selected for this week the recipient of our Big Ass Fan giveaway. Thomas?
The winner of our second Haiku fan from Big Ass Fans is Sally R. from Kentucky.
Sally R. Congratulations. All right. Okay, so I think we've completed all the contests now for a while. Anything else to give away? Ben, giving anything else away?
Just our love and respect.
Just our love and respect to all. Exactly. All right. Our friend Scott Hall, continued best wishes. He's just kind of kicking back, recovering, and doing well. So that's the main thing. Thanks to Ben Chaffins, to Mr. Thomas Kenny. Thank you to Eddie Olczyk and Charlsie Cantey. And it was great to hear the Forego story. Forego, one of my favorite horses. Breeders' Cup, we'll talk more about that. Like Eddie O said today, this classic could just be wide open and fun and exciting, and I think Omaha Beach is going to run in it. I don't know that firsthand, but that's a guess. But we'll continue to discuss that as we get closer to the Cup. More coming up next week, right here. Until then, I'm Kenny Rice, and thank you for tuning in to the Horse Racing Show.